Chapter 17. Against all odds, Sasha, Danny, and Perky Tits, PT for short, had become fast friends. That wasn't to say dust-ups weren't daily, sometimes hourly occurrences, but they had found their rhythm in a family of sorts. However, all that hinged on the map's accuracy, barely a month out of the dirt. "The last one?" Sasha asked PT as they eased the company vehicle into a turn. "Yeah, the last possible candidate site. But Sasha, what if—" PT couldn't say it. Their tentative contracts with various media networks depended on the archaeological payout at the quest's end. Sasha had to be correct. But in her experiences as a scientist and a polymath, mistakes and failures were much more common than singular successes. "It'll be there, I'm sure of it," Sasha said, primarily to her own frazzled nerves as they drove towards the rendezvous with Danny and a local scuba expert. PT was much kinder to her own vehicles, even leased ones, which bored Sasha to tears. But it gave her time to think and take in the beautiful vistas surrounding them, currently wasted by her predicament. She watched the enormous white ships lumbering through the bay and wondered how much they charged for last-minute berths. The fresh, salty breeze made Sasha's hair delightfully curly, always putting a stupid smile on her face. But today she was pensive, unable to hide it from the world. The map they had found in the Turkish temple had shown a clear trail to the Iberian Peninsula. Despite scale inaccuracies and superfluous depictions of monsters and other supernatural pitfalls, it ended here, the Rock of Gibraltar. Ever since they abandoned the temple dig on that full moon night, they hadn't stopped moving towards the monolithic icon. But without fail, Sasha and her crew discovered similar maps, artifacts, and folk tales at every location noted on the route. Although each site was different and unique in its regional and local customs, they shared a running theme. A standard warning was scribbled, chiseled, or whispered into the history of all the spots leading to that famous limestone mountain. And that warning was a resounding, unambiguous, "Stay the hell away from this place." Apparently, a reverse treasure map. The level of fear and superstition passed down through thousands of generations was astonishing and saddening, but it made perfect sense. Something terrible had happened at that first temple. Something so horrific, ominous, and dangerous that it had to be buried and rebuilt multiple times. Compounded over millennia, and retold by so many cultures, she was sure the tale had taken on mythic proportions. Sasha, Danny, and PT had laser scanned, photographed, and sketched each pertinent detail from the associated sites. Then they uploaded the whole mess into a cloud-based AI suite for analysis. It took a few nervous, sweaty days of waiting in unair-conditioned hotel rooms, but they just stared at the laptop, dumbstruck, when the results returned. The software displayed the reconfigured maps, photos, and writing texts as chronological animated videos. Like a rolling GIS map, they could be superimposed on top of each other using any available data points. The team spent a few hours experimenting with frame rates, opacity, and other parameters. Finally, it all danced and flowed, telling many variations of the same story. Playing out like an old-school flipbook, the effect was mind-blowing to watch. The night before the final leg of their expedition, Sasha ran the videos forwards and backwards until her bloodshot, burning eyes closed on their own. The following day, she woke with a jolt to a noisy PT packing all their gear. Exhausted, Sasha returned all the missing messages from her nervous, agitated financial backers. Then she put on a confident face and strode out to the Jeep as if success was a guarantee. She owed her team that much. Still, she wasn't taking any chances. Sasha had packed a separate bag for the U.S. with nothing inside but clothes, cash, and her passport, just in case things went sideways. Perhaps she could regroup in her parents' basement for a year or so, try to sell her sob story for enough money to... She shook her head. That was defeatist thinking, a luxury she didn't have time for. "Hedge all you want, but the show must go on. If this pans out, we can bring in the film crew, stat. Those piranhas are only half an hour away, tops. I can just recreate the final moments of the find, act surprised, and all that bullshit. Yeah, I have drama chops, no problem, she told herself, remembering her acting classes. The map also made something else very clear. The threat, the answer to all of this, was hidden, just like the buried temples. Secreted away somehow from decent folk, isolated, kept at bay. Perhaps a group immune to plague but still carriers, Sasha pondered, imagining a long trail of bloated, pustular bodies left in their migratory wake. Or a niche race, like the redheads in Peru with their elongated skulls. Elites worshipped as gods at first, but eventually hated for their higher intelligence in societies that preferred obedience and conformity, she thought, eyes narrowing. The jeep exited the blacktop onto a sandy gravel road. In a few minutes they reached the camp. PT eased them to a stop under the shade canopy. Exchanging a silent, worried look with Sasha, they jumped out. Her heart uncharacteristically in her throat. Sasha took a few swigs of water to get her voice back as they walked to the dig site near the cliffs. The area, extending from the land into the sea, was marked with an ominous black spot on the ancient maps. To be fair, sometimes it was blood red, but evil nonetheless. "Did we bribe the scuba guy yet?" she asked matter-of-factly. "Yes, though, he did say that it would be extra depending on how far out we take the Zodiac. But he seemed shady enough to be trusted," PT surmised. Shady enough to be trusted was their code for someone who wouldn't go to the authorities, took bribes like a calf to a teat, and didn't have a history of misplaced aggressive behavior. "And Danny?" Sasha asked knowingly. "At his promised spot, of course," PT said, smirking as she swayed under the weight of 2 field packs in the lunch cooler. It is a fantastic view, Sasha thought as they snuck up on him, the ocean in the distance. Dropping her bags next to Danny's lounge chair with a thud, she let out an exaggerated, "Ah." Blocking my breeze there, sweets," he muttered, sipping his beer through a straw. "You are such a strange little man," she said, her words thick with comfortable admiration and biting wit. "Thank you very much, love." "Stellar weather we're having. I mean, just look," he said, waving to the shimmering sapphire expanse. "You gonna work today, Your Highness?" PT asked, smacking Danny's shoulder. "Right, on it, madam. Oof," he said, pushing off the overstuffed cushion. As he did, a tall, tan local in a 3/4 wetsuit appeared from the parking lot, smiling at Sasha. "Miss Dirtz, hello, I am Paolo," he said in a deep accented tone. "It's Dr. Dirtz, and hello to you, Paolo," she said in her confident, flirty tone. "Not the kind of diving we paid for, honey," PT said, handing Sasha her wetsuit. Sigh, okay, fine. To the business at hand, then. "Paolo, you reviewed the area?" she asked, switching into her most comfortable mode. Pure, hard-ass businesswoman. Sure, we'll look, here first," he said, taking out the chart of the ocean floor directly under the cliff. "I color the general area for the next 2 days, but it would help better if I have idea of what we are looking for, yes?" Sasha considered him, summing up his intent in a flash. "Danny!" she yelled, even though he was less than 12 feet away. Sauntering over, he took out his worn calfskin wallet and pulled out 5 20-pound notes. Handing the stack to an initially bashful Paolo, they watched him do the mental gymnastics. He thought there was no need for subtleties with this group. Perhaps he could get more in the coming days. Tucking the bills into a dive pouch, he continued. "Right, so we try this today," Paolo said, tapping the map enthusiastically. "But then dive limit is reached for safety's sake, so either of these 2 tomorrow, but Paolo said, pointing to the red circles on the chart. "Is your show, right?" "Is exactly right, my golden-skinned friend. We are gonna get along just fine," Sasha replied, smiling back at him. Later that day, as the sun was setting, a frustrated Sasha stormed out of the tide and climbed the long staircase back to the parking lot, tearing off gear and cursing at the sand crabs as she went. "Not a thing, not a shiny fucking thing," she said, punctuating the last word with a flipper over her shoulder. Danny and PT cleaned up her wake as usual. "Something I do?" Paolo asked, only half concerned as he dropped his weight belt. Nah, PT replied, watching Sasha disappear into the logistics trailer. Something the world do, not be as smart as her. Oh, okay, so, tomorrow then, no? Yes, Danny said. But perhaps come an hour later than today. She might be, abiding tonight, he said with a drinky pantomime. With Paulo gone, they entered the trailer cautiously, ready to step aside flying laboratory equipment or absorb harsh words. But Sasha was at her desk, head resting on her hands and crying softly. Rushed over, and PT leaned in and hugged her, throwing caution to the wind. Danny patted Sasha's shoulder awkwardly, giving her obligatory there, love in his soothing British accent. I don't understand. It all led here. There's nothing down there but dolphin bones and fish poop. PT gave Danny that worried yet still supportive look they shared when her incendiary gaze was thankfully trained elsewhere. Okay, so listen, Danny started. We hit these other sites, and if that turns up nothing, it's back into the dirt. We'll do a deeper, second sweep up here. The caves and ruins could yield something more, right? He offered, trying to ply her with logic amidst her despair. Yeah, heck, we'll dig to China if... PT started. Sasha's fist hammered the folding table, making a horrible, hollow plastic echo in the small space. No, Sasha said, her eyes narrowed. Look, if we don't find anything in the last 2 zones, that's it. I'll take full responsibility with the financiers. You two just split up the petty cash, take off, and move on. No use, all of us. She trailed off, not worrying them with the dark specifics should they fail. Again they shared the look, but Danny added arched eyebrows and a shrug. It was true. They had hit rock bottom, literally the Rock of Gibraltar itself. Only a few dirt-filled sections remained. Their only hope was the sea, but given the lack of coves and such powerful tides, it would take a miracle to find anything intact. Hey, look. We could all use some sleep before Paulo shows up tomorrow, right? Even you can't outsmart the circadian gods, PT offered, rubbing Sasha's shoulders, knowing it made her instantly groggy and compliant. As she let out a weary sigh, the only other sound was the pat, pat, pat of Sasha's tears on the topo map she had printed earlier. Fine, okay, yeah, you're right, Sasha said, reaching up and squeezing PT's hand. Thank you guys, really. No matter what happens, despite my issues, whatever, you know I love you, right? We know, Danny said. And that's why you're letting us take your finest whiskey here for a nightcap. Sasha chuckled weakly, dismissing them with a wave over her shoulder. Danny grabbed the yet unopened bottle off the desk, more for her sake than theirs. Heading towards the door, he motioned for PT to follow. Night, you two, Sasha said, listening to them shuffle outside. Soon they would be lounging around a fire, drinking under the stars, and casually debating which supplies to pilfer first. Sasha was exhausted, pushing up from the table with a defeated body and mind. The thought of torching the trailer, her inside, flashed for an entertaining second as she stripped, but sleep won out. Falling into her cot, she pulled the thin blanket over her head and willed the darkness to take her.